I'm going to crack straight on into this. By the way, you saw Carel up here earlier. You're going to see a bit more of him because he's doing some sharing tonight, as is Petro. So really looking forward to that. So we're going to have them as guest stars this evening. And then Tim will also be sharing.
Another guest star.
So, if you've got any, as we do these monthly classes on leadership, if you have any particular questions, topics you'd like to get covered, issues you'd like to see taught on, or passages of the Bible, please do let me know as I plan these and we discuss them with Tim and Chevy, so we can feed in things that become apparent as being needed and useful for this particular ministry. So please do let us know what your thoughts are on that. Send me an email, send me a text, tweet me, WhatsApp me, leave a message on the YouTube channel, Google Plus. I don't know. If you can't get hold of me, you have the problem, not me, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Just so many ways of doing that. So
He's everywhere.
I didn't even mention the telephone. So, right, we're going to crack on. Now, tonight, can you become a leader? Can you actually become a leader? If you are one, can you grow as a leader? And if you're not a leader, can you become one? Quick thought about this. Let's remind ourselves what we're talking about in terms of leadership. Leadership is not the role, it's not the title. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the heart that leads to use that word, that leads to actions that then have influence upon others that benefits and blesses them. So it's more about the attitude than it is about the role or the title. It's not what we're talking about. So, for example, although leading a new location service or a family group is a wonderful thing, it's much more than that. It's also things like teaching regularly in children's ministry, where you're taking responsibility for a group of children. Amen. Or helping with the preteens or the teens, which I think Tim might talk about a bit later. It's about lots of different roles, although role isn't really the right word, but it's lots of different opportunities within God's kingdom and within the church, not only within the church, but within the kingdom, to serve God and bless other people. Amen? So that's what we're talking about here. It's an action, not a title. It really is what we're discussing. Are leaders born or made? What's the opinion here? Born or made? What do you think?
Made.
Born? Made? Both. Bit of both? Okay, a bit of both. But what I would say is, all leaders are made. All leaders are made. Because you've got to be refined. You may have some gifts and talents, but unless they're refined by God, they're useless. In fact, they can actually be worse than useless. They can be actively dangerous. Yeah. So in fact, godly leaders, spiritual leaders, are all made. And I think it's important for us, even if you have an avenue and a channel for leadership at the moment, to understand it's important also to grow and be made more useful to God in whatever ways God has chosen you to do so. I admire my wife very much for lots of good reasons. And more and more as the years go by, our 31st year of marriage this year. But I admire her particularly also in her ambitions. If you ask my wife this question, if you say, Penny, are you a leader? She would say no. She would say she's not a leader because she doesn't think of herself as a leader. She doesn't have what many people would consider to be the natural, normal gifts of a natural leader. She doesn't have a particularly strong sense of self-confidence. She doesn't think she's a very good speaker, which isn't true, but that's how she, how she thinks and feels about herself. She'd say she's not really a leader. She doesn't feel comfortable with that. However, she makes the most of her gifts in the kingdom and outside. And I think that's the sign of somebody who wants to grow. And as we grow, then we find God gives us the ways to serve him in powerful ways. So she is a GP, as most of you know. Having become a GP, very shortly after, she was offered a partnership. Two, actually. She had to choose between them. And then she's now a partner in a GP practice, which involves leadership, because you've got to manage a practice. She's now, after that, she became a trainer of GPs, which I think is really leadership. Then she's recently become a trainer of trainers of GPs. Then she moved into the coaching of GPs in difficulty. These are GPs who could get struck off, and trying to help them to resolve the issues and work through their issues so that they can stay in service for the benefit of everybody, not just them. And then this week or last week, she submitted her application to be an examiner of GPs. I mean, I don't know how much higher it gets than that. Maybe there's some other things on the way. But I appreciate her desire to say, I enjoy being a GP, but I think there's more I could offer. And it's very challenging. I mean, we're talking about hours and hours of study and work and 60-page documents to fill in and send off, and appraisal folders that are seriously this thick. I mean, they're enormous big things with photographs and testimonials and forms handed in or filled in and handed in. It's an immense amount of work, but I admire very much that she consistently pushes herself into a new zone of uncomfortability. There should be a better phrase. But in moving into a new area of what is not comfortable. She's not comfortable really with any of this, but she wants to continue to grow. And I think that's helped her also in the church, where she thinks of herself not as a leader, but other people look at her as a leader, as someone to learn from and that is helpful to them and all that kind of thing. And so I think what I'm trying to talk about here is much more an attitude of mind that pervades through all of the parts of our lives than it is about having a role or a particular gift. It's not about someone saying, yes, I think you should do this or you should do that. It's an attitude. And if we carry that attitude into our secular life and, if you like, well, not spiritual life, because everything's spiritual, but into the secular realm in some ways, as well as within the church, we carry the right attitude into it, then God will help us grow, and as he helps us grow, he will reveal the areas of service for which we are best suited given the gifts that we have. Yeah. And so it's an attitude more than anything else. Have a look with me in Acts chapter 7. Let's just sort this out with the scripture, which I think is very helpful. Acts 7. And we won't read this whole passage, but it's Stephen, just before he gets stoned to death and is martyred, and he reviews the history of Israel. And as part of that review, he talks about Moses. Big chunk on Moses here. Acts 7, he starts by saying, in verse 23, when Moses was 40 years old, he decided to visit his own people, the Israelites. He saw one of them being mistreated by an Egyptian, so he went to his defense and avenged him by killing the Egyptian. That is some serious sorting out of an argument. Moses thought that his own people would realize that God was using him to rescue them, but they did not. The next day, Moses came upon two Israelites who were fighting. He tried to reconcile them by saying, "Men, you are brothers, why do you want to hurt each other?" But the man who was mistreating the other pushed Moses aside and said, "Who made you ruler and judge over us? Are you thinking of killing me as you killed the Egyptian yesterday?" When Moses heard this, he fled to Midian, where he settled as a foreigner and had 2 sons. Do you see that in this context, Moses is a self-appointed leader? He's appointing himself. Now he has, in some ways you could say he has some good conviction, but it has not been refined yet. And he's taking control and sorting things out in the way that he feels comfortable sorting them out. And the Israelite recognizes, who are you? Who are you to be judge over us? Who appointed you? The Israelite recognizes he is self-appointed. That's not a healthy place to be, where we're self-appointed. Of course, then God refines him and he goes to the desert. He's there for a long time. And then God calls him in verse 33, 34. And let's just read that. Yeah, verse 33. The Lord said to him, "Take up your sandals. The place where you're standing is holy ground. I have indeed seen the oppression of my people in Egypt. I have heard their groaning and have come down to set them free. Now come, I will send you back to Egypt." This is the same Moses they had rejected with the words, "Who made you ruler and judge?" He was sent to be their ruler and deliverer by God himself through the angel who appeared to him in the bush. By God. Yeah. Now he was ready. 40 years later, he was ready to be sent by God. And so I think it's important that as we consider, some of us may have more obvious leadership gifts than others. If you have those more obvious leadership gifts, it doesn't mean you're more useful to God than someone without the more obvious leadership gifts, because you've got to get them refined. That also means those of us with the more obvious leadership gifts have got to step into roles and areas of leadership that we feel not too comfortable with, because that's how God refines us. And I think although we want to use our gifts in areas that fit, the gifts that we have, we want to find the right channel for those. Nonetheless, we need to do other things. So my example is, as you know, I studied music. I came into the church, And I started leading songs before I was baptized. They had me up leading a song in a house church. I led singing at my own baptism. I did. I got baptized, I got changed, and then with my hair still wet, I came out and Doug Arthur said, would you lead a couple of songs, Malcolm? I said, what, really? He gave me a songbook and said, off you go. So there were 30 people there and I led 2 songs at my own baptism. I mean, that was an obvious area for me. And then a few weeks later, somebody said, would you teach a midweek class? And I said, no. I mean, because I've never done public speaking, ever. In fact, I once tried to do a debate at school, and it was such a catastrophic failure. I promised myself I would never speak in public again. I mean, because I can sing, because you give me a piece of music, and it's organized for me. You know what I mean? I know what I'm doing. But speaking is a very, very different thing, as all of us who've ever done any will know. It's scary, and I said no. And they said, oh, go on, bro. And I said no. And then they said in that voice, it's a little bit different. They said, brother, you need to do it. It's good for you. And of course I begged to differ, but I had no option really. So I did this class, which I won't tell you about because it was terrible, and I still have nightmares about it. But it was important for me to do things that I didn't think I could do. For God to be able to reveal those things. And even with the singing, I mean, I've done a lot of, obviously, music stuff over the years, but there have been periods where I've not been able to, for one reason or another. That's been good for me, to not be able to do what I feel I am good at. Anyway, for those of us here, I would like us to think about that if you have natural gifts, use them, but don't assume that's the only way God can use you. And allow yourselves to be put into the uncomfortability zone, wherever that is for you. God still does what he did with Moses today. He refines us. He takes what we've got, he refines it, ultimately he multiplies it. Moses was much better as a leader afterwards than before, and then he uses it, like with Moses, he used Moses in that context to set free a whole nation and birth a nation. I mean, that's quite a thought. God could use us to birth a nation in a spiritual sense. So quite powerful stuff. So here's a couple of things then. Why don't we do this for a minute? Why can't we lead? All right, and let's think about what are reasons why we can't lead. People say, I can't lead because. Can we just throw a few out?
Shy.
No, not very confident. Too shy.
I'm not spiritual enough.
Not spiritual enough. Whoever decides that, whatever the level that is, but yes, yeah.
Can't read.
Can't read.
It's not my gift.
It's not my gift. Okay, anything else?
Too busy.
Too busy. Yes, yeah.
Afraid.
Fear. Okay, I'm just too afraid.
Too disorganized.
I'm just a disorganized person, therefore I can't lead.
Don't want to be hypocritical.
Oh, don't want to be hypocritical. That's a very spiritual sounding reason.
Go on, Anna.
It's a good one. It's very hard to argue against that one. Yes, okay.
Find groups frightening.
Groups are frightening, which they can be, unless you're a megalomaniac, in which case you've got other problems. But yeah, okay. And then, okay. Now give me some Bible characters who might have exhibited any of those.
Moses.
Moses exhibited which? What? He wasn't good at speaking. Okay.
Gideon.
Gideon because. Sorry.
Well, he didn't want to lead.
lie.
It wasn't my problem. Pick someone else.
A, it's not my problem, and B, I'm not anybody. Who am I? I'm nobody, right?
Elijah,
Because
he felt totally overwhelmed.
he felt he felt too sinful.
Yeah.
In fact, spirituality. He felt too sinful.
Jeremiah.
Jeremiah, because
He just said he couldn't do it.
you know, that's right. I can't. I'm not capable. I'm depressed anyway.
Peter.
I'm going to depress
Peter, because
Fear.
he was afraid. Go away from me, Lord. I'm a
sinful. Yeah, he's the
I'm a
same.
sinful man.
Yes.
Yeah, he was afraid.
Same as Isaiah.
Anybody else? Any others? Jonah, because
He just didn't want to.
He didn't like God's
he
plan.
didn't like God's plan. Okay. God's plan and my plan don't match up, so forget it. Anybody else?
I suppose Paul, because he could have said he was hypocritical, because one minute he was killing Christians, the next minute.
Okay, I've committed too many terrible sins to be used by God, maybe. Yeah, okay. And we could write a whole big list. I mean, we're just scratching the surface of what's on the top of our heads, right? There are so many reasons we could say that God can't use me. But that's us making the decision for God, which is not usually the right way around, I would say. So, now, we're moving into the second part of what we're doing here tonight, and I'm going to ask Carel and Petro to come and share a little bit, because they've recently stepped into doing, leading a family group outside of their comfort zone. So we're going to have them share a little bit, and then a little bit in between that, and then Tim will wrap up. So, which one of you wants to go first? Okay, so we'll have a chair around here. All right, let me move.
Yeah, so one of the key Bible examples for me about leadership, and I know this may come as a surprise to you because it's actually a parable about the Good Samaritan, and it's actually teaching us about who our neighbors are, and but it also teaches me a lot about leadership, the Samaritan's heart. And if I could just go through the parable and then just explain why, in which instances I think that this reminds me about an example for leadership. If we could read along in Luke 10,
Go on, Petro.
Come on, Lisa.
verse 20, Luke 10, verse 30. Jesus said, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he fell into the hands of robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So too, a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, he passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he travelled," he was very busy, by the way, he travelled, he was probably going to a business meeting or had some family issues to attend to or whatever. But he came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. So he didn't look away and pretended not to see him. He actually saw that there was a real need. Here's something that I need to do. I have to help this man. He needs me. Okay? He went to him and bandaged his wounds. Now, I don't think Jesus doesn't say in the parable whether he had any medical training or anything. I don't think he had any medical training. I think he was pouring oil and wine. So he took the tools and the things that he had on him while he was traveling, and he was tending to this man who he didn't know at all. And if we know a little bit about the Samaritans, they didn't have a very good relationship. They were seen as of a much lower stand. Then he put the man on his own donkey, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took 2 silver coins and gave them to the innkeeper. "Look after him," he said, "and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expenses you may have." Now this is amazing because, number one, the Samaritan saw a need. He felt the responsibility to do something. Unlike the Levite and the priest, who decided, maybe, they might have had the skills, and they might have been close by, or their homes might have been close by, or whatever. It might have been more convenient, but they decided they just thought, it's somebody else's problem. Maybe somebody else is going to pass, and they can take care of us. We don't have to feel the responsibility to do anything. And this is where the Samaritan is so, he went out of his way. He didn't know this man. He was traveling. He probably had a lot going on. He was very busy. And he took this man on his own donkey, took him to the inn, and then paid for him to be taken care of. And then he promised that on his return he will refund the innkeeper for any additional expenses. So he was even going to follow up on his
Right.
initial responsibility that he was taking. So, yeah, as many of you know, we haven't been Christians for that long. Well, some people might think it's long, but I mean, we only got baptized in June 2011. And so, yeah, we don't have years and years and years of experience. But, yeah, we were in a family group, and it was great, and it was very encouraging. But we thought that we need something close to home, and that we could possibly, encourage other people in the area where we live. And it would also be easier to invite people from school or from our neighbours or local area to a family group meeting. If we could. But then we thought, then Carel and I started talking about it, and at first we thought that there's no way that we could possibly do it. We don't have the skills. I'm a very shy person and an introvert. I don't have the people skills. And I'm not a great speaker either, and I find it really hard
All
to...
lies. All lies.
Well, this is all God, by the way. So, yeah, we just thought, I just thought of all the reasons why we can't possibly do this. We are very busy. We are driven by deadlines all the time. I've got all these tax returns that I need to do, and we've got month ends and year ends and financials, and Carel's very busy in his work. We've got a little girl, we've got the school runs, we've got everything else. There's no way that we could possibly have time to do this. But then we started praying about it, and we started speaking to various members of our group, and it was just amazing and so encouraging how everybody were just encouraging us and telling us, you know what, it doesn't matter that you don't have all these skills. It doesn't matter. What matters is your heart. And the more we thought about it, and the more we prayed about it, we realized, hang on, maybe we could do this. Maybe we could do this. And and I must say, we started a group last year, October, and I must say that we've been very, very encouraged by the way that the people in our group has been helping us loads. I mean, we can't take credit for anything. We really have a hands-on group with people that go above and beyond, supporting us, helping us, giving us advice. And at the end of the day, where we thought it was a very onerous task, and it is actually not that big a task. Everybody gets an opportunity to share a spiritual thing, and it's very much a group thing. So I would encourage you, if you might see a need within your local community to start something like this, go. You don't have to have all the wonderful skills. Go for it, and and you'll be surprised at how much support there is within the church and amongst us. Go for it.
Amen.
Thank you very much.
So just to add to that, clearly that's typically the conversation we had to get ourselves motivated, and it's about that serving nature, right? It's not like Malcolm said earlier. Leaders, it's the title, it's not the actual deed, where you start directing people around and be boss of whatever the activity is that you put yourself towards. It is that facilitation almost, where you just get people together, get a similar theme or topic of conversation going, and then clearly those with more experience in the group can start sharing and helping to move things along.
Yeah.
So clearly for us, that was initially, the thought was a massive challenge, because we're thinking, oh my goodness, the task is this, and the actions and activities and all these kind of things. But the more we speak to others in the church that's already involved with family groups and already in leadership positions, they really just helped us to get the right mental attitude towards this. And it's not, you're on your own, and now you're going to have to make a difference here. So for us, I think one of the key topics here for me was that mental attitude needs to be channeled in the right way, where it is spiritually challenged. There is that ambition, but it's the ambition to serve and not necessarily that selfish ambition which we covered in previous classes. I'll share one thing, because an example in the Bible for me is Paul, right? His encouragement is fantastic in his letters and his interactions. So within Philippians 2, there's no need to turn there, I'll just read quickly. Chapter 2 from verse 1. Therefore, if you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, in any comfort from his love, if any common sharing in the Spirit, if any tenderness and compassion, then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and one of mind. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourself. And the tone of that letter clearly, carries on through the rest of the passage. But that's the key thing for us, is that attitude. The second one is clearly what we mentioned earlier, is don't ever see yourself as either too young, too old. Don't look for the excuses. There will be plenty of excuses for you to just say no to this. Spend some time in prayer, in conversation, share some thoughts with others to really just get a good grasp of exactly what it's all about. And the rest is just, like Petro says, it's a group effort. People really in church gives us that foundation to just, do our best in whatever we attempt. And also, as young Christians, we learn day by day. We have no answers, not little, no answers. So it's good for us to maybe come up with a question and see how others addresses that and help us with the combined solution. So the last one in closing is, it's a journey. You'll need to start somewhere, right? You need to just put yourself out there and get the wheels in motion. Otherwise, later in life, you're going to have other excuses when, too old, not really for me, that kind of thing. So, in closing, that's pretty much what we thought would be the best approach for us. I'm sure you guys have your own thoughts and approaches, but anyone can really make a difference in this church.
Thank you. Turn to, well, you're already in Luke 10, just a scripture there which I think is great for us to appreciate. Right at the beginning of the chapter it says, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into his harvest field. And I just think how true this is, that there is so much to do, and there's only a few people to do it. The two areas I was thinking about when I was thinking of sharing today, one is just that there's a lot of little niches within the church that we can help with. Recently I was in pre-teens. I really enjoy being in pre-teens often on Sundays, and Elliot had put himself forward to lead the pre-teen group, and he was teaching them this new game called Hot Potato, and they loved it. I mean, the youngsters loved it, and I came in as this this Bible bashing old guy who had about 5 minutes at the end to share a point from scripture. But it was inspiring to me to see a young person in the church having a go and doing such an amazing job. It's amazing how the youngsters respond in a situation like that. Those preteens really respond. They've just loved it. Right now they're having a great class and they're really enjoying it. Teens having a great class, but somebody has got to put themselves out there. When there's a teen night, someone's going to open up their home. When there's whatever it is, whether it's the worship, whether it's the, all these little bits and pieces, I want to encourage us just to just put ourselves out there and have a go. All these, I really appreciate all of us doing so much in the children's ministry. Again, it's the work is a few, but so that's the first thing I think that we can do is just really be willing and eager to fill these little niches that are just throughout the church. And the other thing I think is really for us to have faith that we can go out there and lead groups now, groups of the future, around Thames Valley. We've never done this before. This is not a plan that anybody out knew. I've never seen sort of like people say, well, let's start a group here, let's start a group there. But that is the situation we're in and how encouraging it is.
Yeah.
It's hugely encouraging to think that we have a group in, Newbury. We have a service once a term in Oxford. There's a group in Bristol. There's a group in Deepcup. There's a group in Marlow. All these groups, they're so exciting, but they all come from somebody saying, let me step out and be the one who starts something. Maybe it's more relevant for those of us who are just starting out in our careers, but maybe you'll be offered a job in Guildford. Maybe you'll be offered a job in, Salisbury, I don't know. Maybe you'll be offered a job in Cirencester or Swindon, or, the end is limited, and there's just, there's no end. But what I want to encourage us to think is just like God says to Joshua at the beginning of the book of Joshua, he says, wherever you put your foot, I'll give you that place. And, that I think is really relevant for us. It's just, instead of thinking, I couldn't, let's think about what we can do. Thank you very much.
I'm going to wrap up in a second. Let me ask you just to reflect briefly on and what stood out to you tonight, from things that were shared, from things from the Bible, or sharing from Carel and Petro. Anything, just jumped out at you as relevant to you, helpful to you, anything like that? Yeah.
Just the point about it just having a heart to do it. That's what God sees. He's not looking at our specific talents and abilities. It's the heart.
Looking at the heart, that's the most important thing. Cool. Yeah.
The thing is that having that attention to the needs, to really look for the needs, because I think we can be very busy and we're absorbed with everything that we are doing, and we might already be doing a lot, and so we can just focus on that and then not see the other needs that are around us. I think that's a key. I really appreciate the passage that Petro shared. I think it's very apt. I think that's what leadership is about, is looking for the needs.
Actively looking, rather than being passive.
Yeah, that's right.
Looking.
Yeah.
Great. Hannah.
It really helped me what you were sharing about your own life, in terms of that God would refine you at different stages in different areas, because I think sometimes I can sort of fall into the trap of thinking, I'm supposed to be leading in this area, and so either I'm going to be leading in this area or not at all, as opposed to sort of going with where God wants me to go. So I think that's really refreshing to think of it like that.
Great. Thank you. Yes.
I think just the point that Tim made about how the groups, over time we've got groups in different locations. It's quite far out, and I think, where I come from in Cape Town, everybody's like 10 minutes and people were actually encouraged to live near church. It's like, no, you don't move, you don't go anywhere. You come and you stay around the area so that you don't have to battle to get to church. But I think it's quite encouraging to think that we can have strong disciples here, and we can move, and it's okay, because we can then start a little group there. But you see people traveling to church here, hour and a half coming to church here, which I think is very encouraging, just to see people's commitment, and that we can reach out further than Thames Valley. And I just think it's encouraging,
Yes.
different.
Absolutely. Good. Yes, Shem.
I think a couple of things. I think what Petrus shared about the amount of support that she actually said it wasn't as bad as she thought it was going to be. That
You're not on your
it's often a bit like that though with life, isn't it? So many times when we make that effort to step outside our comfort zone,
Yes.
God is the one who steps in
Yes.
in the form of
Find the support you weren't
He gives
expecting.
us, obviously we have our relationship with him, but obviously too with each other. And even Petra talked about even in her group that she's leading, she's found she's had a lot of support. So I think that's really great.
And the second?
Oh yeah, the second.
Somebody's listening.
Second.
That's okay.
First
Okay.
one was a good one.
I think to me it's about the fact that it's an attitude and an attitude of submission. I think overall the one when things about leadership, things about you have to acquire some skill sets, some skills or some knowledge or stuff. But to know today that it's more like it's like becoming a conduit. So you submit and then God uses you. So you become a tool in the hands of God rather than you are calling something that you want.
Very good. Absolutely. Oh, go on. What was the second one?
It was to do with Elliot, and just how exciting it is to see younger people stepping up, like Elliot with the pre-teens, and even like Alex and Diana.
Helping with teams.
Helping with the teens, and
Yeah.
Ben and Cherie. You know, just how, you know, not being put off by being young. Again, going back to what Peter was saying.
Excellent.
But just you can easily say, well, I haven't got that experience.
Super.
But yet how naturally these niches are being filled.
They do. Let's wrap up with, that's a very good point to end on, really, that it doesn't matter if you think you're a bit too young or a bit too old, for that matter, for some of us. It's really about God. You may know this illustration. I'll read you a selection from it about the people who you think, if you think you can't be used by God, then you're in good company biblically. Abraham lied, Sarah laughed at God. Moses thought he couldn't speak, David's armor didn't fit. John Mark was rejected by Paul, Timothy had a bad stomach, Hosea's wife was a prostitute. Amos's only training was in the school of fig tree pruning, Jacob was a liar, David had an affair, Solomon was too rich, Jesus was too poor, Abraham was too old, David was too young, Peter was afraid, Lazarus was dead. John was self-righteous, Naomi was a widow, Paul was a murderer, so was Moses, Jonah ran from God, Miriam was a gossip, Gideon and Thomas both doubted, Jeremiah was depressed and suicidal, Elijah was burned out, John the Baptist was a loudmouth, Noah got drunk, Moses had a short fuse, so did Peter, Paul and lots of folks, and Samson had long hair.
Probably tattoos as well.
Just too much. Next time you think you can't be used by God, just reflect on that list.
Amen.
Amen. Let's enjoy some fellowship, everybody. Thanks for your attention tonight.